Hello, everybody, and welcome to another Spark of Genius Flesh and Blood production, kicking back into the heavy hitters era until what May, June,
three
maybe something
months
like that.
from February.
No, one
Oh, four
quarter,
four
right?
months. It might be four.
Quarter-ish.
Yeah. So looking like it'll be around the May June time period.
Yeah, yeah, just in time for Nats.
That's how
Joined by
they
my
they always do it that way,
co-commentator,
don't they? Oh, there's always a
co-caster,
second.
co-compatriot.
Hi,
God damn
glad to be
it.
here.
um,
Yeah,
so Yeah, I think this is shaping up. We've only had a couple events so far, um, as far as the battle harden goes, but we've had two battle hardens for heavy hitters so far, and we have the road to Nats coming out. So by the time this video comes out, the first weekend of roads will be this coming weekend, essentially. So it's a good time
that's
to kind of
yeah. This Saturday, right?
get this Saturday, Sunday for another 3 or 4 weeks, something along those lines. And CC is going to be half the event. So we're going to talk a little bit about top five heroes that we think you should consider slash play for this season. Starting off with KO, so I've tried to make this list not double up on a class. However,
Hmm.
because of how open the meta is, I will put a disclaimer to say that if you have a pet deck with a ton of reps into it, you should play the pet deck for roads.
Hmm.
By no means should you like randomly swap a hero and put 5 games into one of these heroes and be like, I'm gonna do better on KO than I would on my 300 game Vinset deck that I've been teching for the meta. No,
Right.
probably not.
And
But
that's
this
not
is
because the heroes are particularly hard to play, right? It's just
correct.
because the meta is pretty open at this point.
The meta's open. You can win a Rhodes with like almost any hero. I'm pretty convinced.
Hmm.
The first one, it's a fan favorite at the moment.
Yeah.
19-2 KO coming through.
Lots of KO
Um,
content out there, but
yeah,
for a good reason.
Yeah, so he is. This is in no particular order. KO, armed and dangerous, is kind of the preeminent brute at the moment. However, Leviathan and Rhine are also good options as far as people wanting to pick a deck to try to like come down with some road to nationals. KO has an extremely high hand value per turn. What I mean by the combination of his equipment suite, his blocking capability, and his offense is extremely high,
Hmm.
and he ends up getting a lot of very very easy overrate turns. By overrate, these things are like Blood Rush Bellow, Cast Bones to like really spiral out of control. Like we've all seen Cast Bones 12 go against CNC and a whole bunch of shenanigans coming after that. KO is just very good at extracting the value of heavy hitters cards, and he has such a nice backdrop of equipment from previous sets, specifically Scowling Fleshbag. That equipment is a bit of a menace as it takes away a lot of the threat of crackback from a lot of aggro decks, which
Hmm.
happen to be a lot of historically Brute's issues, like the very hyper aggressive, especially Rhinar, the very aggressive decks.
Yep.
And KO doesn't have like Husk to really go back on like Leviathan does to just have the fridge. But Scowling Fleshbag is just like insanely good against these very like go wide. But even some of these other decks like Azalea, you could still find spots to play it in if they come in with like Rabble or something like that. You still
Yep.
always will have a place to do it. And so KO, I would say, is also the most beginner friendly as far as learning the lines for this
The
deck is really not.
fundamentals
Yeah, it's really
of yeah.
not that complicated. If you learn like a couple of the key lines and the value of your cards, generally not that complicated to play this deck. I think you can play this deck pretty decently at about 20 reps. Um, and then after that, you could just kind of go matchup specific depending on what's in your meta. Also, one of the most flexible heroes in terms of um, the ability to both block out and go aggressive. Like your hand, you could literally just spend time with your hand, and because you have so many 3 blocks in the deck, you can really pick your spots. Which for an
Right.
aggro deck, really not usually. Like Azalea, Ninja, they have to go off. They have a lot of 2 blocks. A lot of their hands just don't block very well. They don't have very good armor. They don't have
Yep.
that much like preventative tools at their disposals, whereas KO does. So that's why KO is kind of the
Yeah.
first one to
That's a
list.
very good point, I think, because you can actually be very flexible in what you do per turn. You get a
Yeah.
hand, and then basically you can choose to be defensive with it. You can choose to be offensive with it. Cards like Cast Bones, you can just keep that the one
Mhm.
card and then just kind of power up your next turn like crazy. So block nine,
Exactly.
play Cast Bones. You
Yep.
can. I mean, your turn or your opponent's turn is like insanely flexible for you, and then you can, like you said, choose your moments to jump in. So,
Yep.
I think he rewards fundamentals, like you said. if you know the value of your cards, if you know what's worth blocking with and what's not,
Yep,
I think this
for
this
sure.
hero is a very good pick for this meta.
Yeah,
All
for
right.
sure. You can go into the next one here.
Yep. Next one I've got Dory.
Ah, we're going
OG.
back to welcome to
There's a
Wraith
theme here. We've got
Dory.
like Brute, we've got Warrior. I mean, obviously the set has like Warrior, Guardian, and Brute, but we're going back to
Yep.
Welcome to Wraith Roots here.
Yeah, so Dory is kind of two-toned here, with the reason being on this list. First of all, she got some very nice support cards. Blade Flurry, or the McFlurry as people like to
Mm.
call it, insane card. Like it's a 0 for 4 that buffs both swings, whereas your second swing with Dory was very rarely buffed. If it was buffed by like Brave Forge, which wasn't that hard to block. But now with just Blade Flurry, your second swing comes in for 5. And usually you don't need more than 2 to go over that first attack. And so it just gets such insane value. There's the other card that allows you to get the agility and go again. The other Majestic that came into the set. And her tools, and she also got the new chess piece that lets you create a vigor on hit. That works for every swing too. So if you hit on both of your sabers, you could technically pitch into double vigor, which is kind of
Mm-hmm.
pog, right? The other thing is like Dory just blocks insanely well. Like she has a very nice sideboard options with Steel Blade Shunt. Going into like Tunic, she has a lot of her cards blocked for 3. She uses reactions very well, and her explosive turns are insane to the point where she has so many options. It is really hard for the opponent at this point to actually figure out all the outs, right?
Mm-hmm.
To sit there and be like, how do I block this? Well, there's so many tools at Dory's
Yeah.
disposal now. I don't know if it's possible to
It,
consider. Like, I don't think
yeah.
it's physically possible to consider all the outs in
I
most
think we
scenarios.
started off with like a decision tree of like 2 points, right?
Yes.
And then now it's probably branched off to like an order of magnitude that it's like I can't really decide what to block with. So I think you have to
Exactly.
really start counting what your opponents played at certain
Mhm.
points in the game and figure out what are the odds of them having
Yeah.
X card,
Yeah,
right?
pretty much. And the other thing is like Dory is just like KO is like very happy to block out and wait for like that big pivot turn when there's no like really good on hits. She still has a pretty nice fridge to go with it. And she has very good kind of overall offensive and defensive. So it really comes down to the flexibility of these decks, and all the decks in the top 5 have quite good flexibility. I would say that's key because I see this meta as so open that flexibility is you're going to see a
Mm-hmm.
lot of different decks at Rhodes
Yep.
at Pro Tour. Like you're going to see a bunch of decks. It's not very far from the what it used to be like the Lexi dominated meta, or like back when Chain
Oh
dominated the
yeah.
meta, or
You could
Starvo
count
dominated the meta.
on like a third of your
A
matchups
shit
being
ton
a
of them.
certain
Yep.
hero, right? But now you'll be lucky to see. I
Yes.
mean, more than one of, of a hero
Yeah.
probably.
No, it's true. It's a matter of there's like what people think are meta, what people think are the counters, and what
Mm-hmm.
people think are the counters to the counters,
Yeah.
which is kind of something
And
we
pet
saw
decks.
before. And pet decks. That's everyone just
Mash it
kind of
all
does
together.
whatever.
Yeah.
That's pretty great. So Dory kind of on this list
Yeah.
for
I
those kinds of
I will point
reasons.
out too that you mentioned because of the vigor tokens that she has access to, her turns were very how to say it, like it's very catered. Like her pitch
Hmm.
curve was always at a in a state where she had like a single blue and then that'd be all she would use for the entire turn. The vigor tokens then give her the flexibility to use like a single yellow pitch, or even less so, right? You can fix those hands where you draw like a yellow and 3 reds, or maybe no yellows, right? You can still do
Yeah.
something with the vigor. So I think that's a very powerful tool for her, especially.
Yeah. Like worst comes to worst, you full block and use your vigor to swing the sword that you might have a counter on. And
Right?
it's
Yeah,
just like
to not lose your
you could be
counter.
yeah, be forcing multiple cards or a D-react is kind of nice considering you've spent literally no cards to do
Hmm.
so, right? So kind of insane value-wise. So
Awesome.
next hero we have is the new warrior hero from
Hmm.
Heavy Hitters, Kasai. And this is the only time I'm doubling up, but I'm doubling up for very different reasons. First of all, Kasai being a new hero is interesting because she does have tools from a previous set because she's the newest CC hero, but obviously she came in a young flavor, as they say, with a different ability. So effectively still a different hero. However, she still retains a lot of the key power cards, namely Blood on her hands from previous sets that she's able to utilize very, very well. And a couple things that are really going for Kasai is that her flexibility in her value generation is up there with kind of all the other decks in this format in general. First, because she gets access to this equipment that everyone forgot about, this warrior leg slot that essentially allows you to keep getting rewarded by small hand value. By small hand value, I just mean like pitch, have a go against source, swing, swing, get your armor back on your Valiant Dynamo in case anyone didn't guess that's Valiant Dynamo.
Yeah.
But you keep getting so much armor from that. Like in a course of a game, you can get like 7 to 10 armor off this leg piece. It's kind of insane. And just off that mid-rangey kind of grind, it's very, very good for Kasai. She is able to create her own on-hit effects from her hero ability to banish 2 reds and 2 yellows. And her draw engine from gold, along with things like Cashin, allows her to get very, very good value off her sword swings because her Centauri's turn into be a zero cost. And she still gets that new Vigor chess piece to be able to create so many resources that you have so much shit on your board. It kind of reminds me
Yeah.
a bit of mech. Like you've got so many tokens and counters you're worrying about, and you have a nice alternative. You have two nice alternative win cons if you don't want to just go grindy. You have raise an army off your golds, which giving you the Centauri Cell Swords, being able to 3 go again,
Yep.
and you have blood on her hands, which provides very, very explosive turns, especially with things like Blade Flurry. Of course, is still something Kasai
Still
can
a
use.
thing. Yep.
Oh yeah, slice and dice, another 0 for 4 off 2 attacks. So there is a kind of bevy of tools at Kasai's disposal, depending on the kind of matchup she might be expecting. So I really like that flexibility, and Kasai is looking to be like one of the best kind of grindier mid rangey heroes in
Yeah.
the format.
Absolutely. Yeah. Nothing much to add to that. I think you hit it nail on, or nail on the head. Head on the nail.
Yeah, I did it. I did hit it nail on. I mean, I do like to hit things nail on.
We'll move
All
on.
right.
Victor.
Uh, the grinning mastermind himself. Now,
Love this guy.
the fifth hero is not Bravo. However, I very much think if there's a Guardian that that you want to play that maybe you don't usually play Guardian necessarily. Like the thing with Bravo is like Bravo players have kind of been around forever. So if Bravo's your pet deck, you're pretty likely to just stick on Bravo and just like tailor it to the meta.
Hmm.
But I think Victor's place in the meta kind of drowns out a bunch of decks and again has such good value generation. I'm mainly talking about his first ability to draw a card off gold, which allows you to convert your 4 cost attacks pretty much the best out of any other hero in the game, right? And that's because you can convert, like if you're on Tunic, for instance, right? You essentially get to have any red 4 for 8 in your arsenal, be able to full block, generate gold with like Test of Might, draw a blue, use Tunic, and literally get 20 value off your turn. I know that sounds insane, but like hear me out. If you have a 3-3-3-4, so that's your blocking hand,
Hmm.
right? So you have 3-6-9-4. So it's 13, right? And then your Tunic's going on 3. You get the gold, you win the clash, you draw the blue, and then your turn is literally use Tunic, pitch the blue, choke slam for 8. So you've now converted your 13 hand and your 8 in arsenal into
Hmm.
2021. Like
Right.
I know I'm it sounds specific. It's not that far fetched. Like a lot of
Yeah.
those turns are really not that hard because you run a lot of 4 for 8s in general, and a lot of
Exactly.
them have very good on hits. Like debilitates a 4 for 10 if you get the crush because of the
Yeah.
-2. And Victor is also the easiest hero to play stuff like Pulverize for because you actually get to draw all of those cards. And I think the ability to also stay on par for damage because of that draw ability is quite crucial for cards like Trounce, being able to get very good value, especially drawing into his key card Golden Sun to be able to close out games with 10 overpower is very nice. I will say that his one issue that I do see right now, his ability to close games is
Mm.
questionable in a lot of different matchups because he really only has Golden Sun with overpower, and then everything else is like he doesn't have on demand dominate like Bravo does. So he's a bit of a like he wins by destroying the enemy win con rather than
Yeah.
pushing his own. Much less proactive than Bravo, like much less proactive because a
Yeah.
lot of his gold gen is on the defense with Trounce and with Test of Strength, right? So
Yeah.
that is the one thing I will say. However, playing this deck into like and even KO or the Warriors or like Ninjas, like getting super good value, very, very good. Not difficult to play at all. I'd say this is probably one of the more beginner friendly heroes to kind of understand and play some reps into and get a grasp on his initial game plan.
Yep. Yep. Absolutely. I think he's probably one of the. I don't want to say grindier, but definitely one of the more defensive heroes in the meta.
I
Since
would say
we've lost,
I'd say he's grinder. I'd say he's grindy.
he's grindy. Yeah, he's also
Oh
grindy.
yeah.
But since we've lost old him, I think he kind of fills that gap a little bit. Right? He doesn't have Crown of Seeds, but
Yes.
what he does offer, I think, has its own merits. Right? Like you said, the
Yes.
insane value from just getting gold and drawing an extra card. It allows him to be more defensive, but also he can swing back with not much at all, really. Like
Yep.
he blocks up and then swings back for something that your opponent kind of has
Yeah.
to respect. So in that sense, he's doing both. He's being defensive, but also can be pretty powerful on turns where you've kind of already spent cards to block. So
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, I've played against him, a few times now. He's really hard to get around. It's like you
Yeah.
feel like you're doing a lot of stuff to him, but when he comes back to you, it's like you check his health total, and he didn't really do much, and then he comes back with 8, and you're like, oh, I guess I'll block out with 3 cards and then skip a
Yep.
turn, and he just comes back swinging. So he's a
Yep.
very good hero,
Because
very good.
yeah, he still gets access to like spinal,
Yeah,
pulverize, as I
he can
mentioned,
be
all the fourth
disruptive
rates.
still. Yeah.
Yep, Golden Sun. And he comes with a shield that's through another 3 health, right? Unless you use the gold, so you still get 2 health. So you still get the full Guardian Suite and a cracked shield. So he just comes in with so much health. So
Yeah.
I think Victor is definitely one of those choices that you
Yeah.
might want to look at for roads. So we got one more hero here. Probably would surprise some people. Dromai.
She's back.
No, she's back. Well, she never left. Did she?
Yeah,
I
she's
think
never left.
Dromai has been like a mainstay of the circuit.
Yeah.
I mean, she just top 8 at Worlds pretty recently. I think two of them were in top 8, I think.
Yeah, I think so.
And she never really went anywhere. And the reason is because, Dromai players really like Dromai players. And I was thinking that the thing is with Illusionist, Prism is definitely a deck. It just won Battlehard in Liverpool, I think. Rob Can won that. And into the top 8 was like, I think Guardian something to be. It was a very good
It was
Prism,
stacked. Yeah.
very good Prism bracket, and I think you just dodge your bad matchups. I think Prism is just a little bit too polarizing for me to recommend a player to be like, hey, never play Illusionist, or just like, oh, you played this deck way back, maybe go back into it. I think people have a lot more exposure to Dromai, whereas Prism is literally just got this new weapon. Like she is
Yeah.
very new, and I don't know if I would really say top 5 where she can like crush some matchups. I think she gets dumpstered by other matchups. Very polarizing. Dromai has a bit less variance in that curve, whereas she can still do pretty well into a lot of different matchups. I think her brute matchup is not particularly great. I think Guardian can kind of go both ways, even though like there's a plan for that. But realistically, I also think Dromai is actually the very good anti deck. And what I mean is that decks that are trying to counter what they perceive as the meta, Dromai kind of feeds on them. And the one big one from the Age Open that just happened this past weekend, I think, Alan Liu brought in this Teklovos in top 8, top 4, Teklovos in top 4, and Lubers Rise Up and all. But like
Yeah.
he was kind of looking at it, and I actually watched his top 4 game against Dromai. Holy free! I think it's 40-0. Like the game was doomed
Oof.
from the start. And I think the Teklovos's his strong point of just like going kind of heavy fatigue, building
Yeah.
Teklo and like beating up decks that were trying to target KO or something like that was fine. But then you run into Dromai and it's like, do you have a plan for this? No? I guess you just lose.
Yep.
Like Dromai is the ultimate deck check. You
Right.
flip over Dromai and like, do you actually have a plan for Illusionist, or are you just looking for the other decks and hoped you would dodge me? You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
Because this deck is very hard to play against. Dromai is still powerful. Tome hasn't gone. Tome of Imperial Flame hasn't gone anywhere.
Yeah.
Big Dragons, she still has some nice pieces that she got in heavy hitters that she can kind of play around with. Her overall card quality is still very high as Illusionist and Draconic, and I think she can kind of go a bunch of different ways. It's not that easy. Like, yeah, people put in poppers, but like a lot of the decks, it's like how much can you really respect Dromai in every single meta if it's such an open meta? So it'll kind of come down to, do you have local Dromai players kind of thing, or like what is your local meta? I think
Yeah.
Dromai will be a little bit better if you do know what you think is going to show up. For instance, if I know a bunch of brute players just going to be running around doing stuff like Rydars, I'm probably not going to want to bring Dromai, but that's local meta dependent. I think overall, as open it goes, I'm going to put Dromai into this top 5, especially for Dromai players who kind of just want to bring this back. If maybe not exactly their pet deck, but they have some reps in this hero.
Yeah, absolutely. I think she's one of those decks that just gets better the less people play her, right? Or the
Yeah.
less people expect her, because
It's like Kano.
Just like Kano, exactly. You run less
Yeah.
AB because you're like, what are the odds of me running into a Kano? So you just drop to AB2 or AB1 even just to respect the rune blades, which is like
Yep.
not really much a thing anymore. But so maybe you just
The
cut all
Rune
AB
Blades.
from your deck. But
Yeah.
the less six attack cards you run, the less poppers you run now in your decks, the more Dromai can feed off of you. So I think that gives her an opportunity, a unique opportunity to be a little better. But I will say that if KO becomes a lot more popular, it'll be very tough for her to kind of claw back, right?
Yeah.
Because
I
he's like the
don't.
popper master.
Well, yes and no. Like he has less than Reinhardt because KO has a lot of fake sixes. Like he has a lot of fives that don't turn into poppers on the chain because you're blocking with them, so they don't turn into sixes.
That's fair.
But
That's fair. Yeah, yeah.
he definitely isn't as great as defending like Guardian and Reinhardt are.
Mm-hmm.
But what he lacks in that he makes up with hitting you for 20 plus damage. So you fatigue him by like just throwing like getting cards. You get the dragons out of their hand when they block. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And then you might pop like Chromine, Kyloria, stuff like that.
Just the
Mirror
important
guy.
important ones.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then you like hit Mirror Guy with like a claw with agility might, you forego again, hit the
Mm-hmm.
Mirror Guy, then pitch to swing big in their face and take cards, that kind of
Yeah.
thing. Um, but it's still like very kind of cushy for KO being like the
Yeah.
I have poppers built in and I'm very aggressive. So quite nice.
Yeah, I think just the fact that heavy hitters in the title of the set really has to do with big attacks, it makes it a bit more rough for her. But like you said, the meta is very open. I think that Dromai really thrives in an open meta where you have so
Yeah.
many different decks and so many different chances to fight decks that have not prepared for a Dromai matchup. So, this is the time I think for Dromai. It might not be in a month or two from now, but I think now is really, really good time to play her.
Yeah, 100%. This is by no means supposed to be a tier list or anything like that. So we're gonna cut it from here, not talk about the other heroes. Otherwise, we're gonna
Yep.
turn it into a tier list. But we don't have time for that. So
Mm-hmm.
we're just meant to do this top five. Hopefully, everyone likes this kind of content. If you do, feel free to like, comment, subscribe. Do you agree with us? Do you disagree with us? Are there other kind of decks you feel will rise to the cream of the crop of this RTN season? If so, let us know why. Very curious myself. And with that, from wherever you're watching the world, have a good morning, good afternoon, or good evening. Bye for now.